Don't have to wait for the moderator, but in this case, the bottleneck was on the microphones. So thanks very much for having the panel here already. I would like to introduce the distinguished panel to you in a second. First of all, I need to introduce myself. My name is Walburga Hemetsberger. I'm the CEO of Solar Power Europe, and I'm very happy to be here today with such a distinguished panel to discuss following from the first opening panel where we heard about renewable producers, renewable hydrogen producers and electrolyzer producers, to discuss with industry and policymakers how demand can be spurred, what the bottlenecks are for those who want to use renewable hydrogen in the next couple of years, and what policymakers can do. So we have Christophe Grudler, MEP, member for the European Parliament. Thanks for being here today. You got your mic earlier than me, even if you arrived later. So very nice. We then have Per Christian Erisken, CEO of Havrand. Havrand. Thank you for helping. We have Joaquim Nunes Almeida. We've seen each other on storage this morning online. Yeah. Thanks very much for being here, Deputy Director General of DG GROW, European Commission. Then we have Marc van Doorn, who is representing Fertiberia, the fertilizer producer. And last but not least, we have, and I'm looking for your name now here at, because I don't have my...
Oh, there.
Sorry, Ola Hansén. Yes, it's not visible for me, Ola Hansén. Sorry for that error. Ola Hansén, you're Head of Public Affairs of H2 Green Steel. So we're looking forward to discussing about green steel, about green aluminium, and about fertilizers. So let me take a seat while I'm still running on the panel. So we're going to try to cover as many topics as possible, prices, infrastructure. We want to talk about supply chains, but most importantly, first of all, I think we need to ask the European Commission, because you came up with a very important plan. We heard it already in the first panel. Repower EU just published. Renewable hydrogen plays a major role, more important even than what we've seen in the past. And I just want to, ask you a simple question: why is renewable hydrogen so important for the European Commission? We heard the Commissioner already before elaborating on it, but to hear from you, why is it that you proposed this hydrogen accelerator? And what is needed to speed up and scale up, Joaquim?
Yeah, there's been a certain inflection of reorientation. I'm not sure is my mic okay? I have a certain insecurity that I'm not being heard. There's been a slight change of orientation in the sense that, and it's still very much true, that hydrogen started as we need hydrogen because we've got the Green Deal, we have to decarbonize because we have to fight climate change, and therefore electrification is not enough. Some industries can simply not be electrified, so we need something else. That's something else, and the most promising something else is hydrogen. Now I think the Russian aggression against the Ukraine and the whole idea of severing ties with Russian gas has also brought the resilience dimension that was in a way always there. We always sensed, like the previous speakers had said, that from the very beginning that hydrogen plus electrification would give Europe the potential to become energy self-sufficient. It's not meaning that we are planning to be 100% self-sufficient, but the knowledge is there that we can be largely self-sufficient if we seize this opportunity. And this, after the history of energy dependence, which we have been for the last 40, 50 years, is a huge change. Therefore, to reply, if I'd have to reply to a child your question, if I had to answer to a child that would ask me, why is hydrogen important? Hydrogen is important because we need to decarbonize, we need to become more resilient, and in order to do so, electricity is not enough. We can't do it only with electricity, we need something else, and that something else is hydrogen. Now, would you like me to expand on some aspects of Repower EU? Just broad
Maybe just quickly, because we will be touching on it still quite a lot, I think, during the panel. But if you want to just highlight a few elements, yeah.
I can come back later.
Okay, perfect.
Just if this short introduction was enough, yeah.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Joaquim.
Thank you.
I'm now turning to those industries who are relatively new in using renewable hydrogen, or hydrogen more generally, which is aluminium and steel. So far, hydrogen has not been used, but there's big plans to use renewable hydrogen more specifically in your industries. Steel and aluminium. Why would you choose? Also, an easy question to start a debate with. Why would you choose to use renewable hydrogen in your industry? How important is that choice? And also, how big is the challenge? So maybe starting with you, Ola, to kick off with that question.
Yes, thank you very much. H2 Green Steel, for those who don't know about the company, we're an industrial startup. I think we just were 1 year here in April. And our purpose, in addition to, of course, be a growing business globally, is to decarbonize hard-to-abate industries, and we start with steel. So we see ourselves as a renewable green hydrogen company, but sort of steel is what we start with. And why steel? 7 to 9% of global emissions comes from the steel sector. 25% of European industry emissions come from the steel sector. So if we are to meet the Paris Agreement targets and reach net zero by 2050 on a global level, earlier on the European level, hopefully, then the steel sector must go to net zero as well. With hydrogen, we can do that, almost. As a first step, we could reduce the emissions compared to the traditional blast furnace route, where you reduce the iron ore with coke based on fossil coal. With using hydrogen in this process, we can reduce emissions by 90 to 95%. So it really does the difference for us in that sense.
And how big is the challenge, if I may ask?
Yeah, it's a big challenge, but I think we're now raising, of course, in our B round, the funding we need for the first plant, about more than 4 billion euros in that sense, and the plant will be built in the north of Sweden. We will start production in 2025. At first 2.5 million tons, and then a couple of years later up to 5 million tons. And to put that in a perspective, it's about a little bit less than 5% of steel production in Europe. Mm-hmm. And then, as a second step, we will have a plant also on the Iberian Peninsula, looking at sites in both Portugal and Spain. We have a joint venture there with Iberdrola. We will run the electrolyzer jointly. Iberdrola will provide the renewable electricity, and we will build a green iron production unit and potentially also a steel unit. So it will be, when we succeed, which we will have a substantial part of the European iron and steel production.
Funding is the main challenge. We'll get back to that.
Yeah, but and just for those interesting figures, I mean, the electrolyzer size, I think, in the north of Sweden will be about 800 megawatts, and the one on the Iberian Peninsula, 1 gigawatt.
Okay, nice sizes. Over to the aluminium industry. Per Christian, so what is the challenge? Why are you looking into renewable hydrogen? And yeah, let's maybe if you want to compare sizes.
Yeah, I think as H2 Green Steel, we're a fairly new company with Hydro Havrand, but it's a fully owned subsidiary of Norsk Hydro, and then a major energy and aluminium company. And I think what we see in debate is very much around having hydrogen as feedstock, while it's also then using the energy carrier, hydrogen as an energy carrier, and as a fuel for high heat processes. And that's what we've seen in Hydro, that we can introduce that in the high heat process in Hydro when we're producing aluminium. And yeah, even though we were a small startup, then with Hydro in the back, 17,000 employees in Europe, and multiple sites that have the potential to introduce hydrogen. And why is that important for aluminium? Well, aluminium that's being consumed in Europe is about 16 million or 14 million tons, expected to grow to 16 within 2030, and that is then associated with an emission of about 120 million tons of CO2. You cannot address all of this with hydrogen, but you can address part of that, and you can do it today. So it's in the alumina calcination processes. You can start to introduce hydrogen into that part, but also then into the melting furnaces of the production line of aluminium. And using that basis for decarbonizing internal offtake, but having then that as a platform to also support the more nascent hydrogen demand in other industries. So then we have the anchor customer with Hydro and can then supply to mobility and maritime sector. And if we're just looking holistically at the natural gas fuel consumption in Hydro today, that we want to look at fuel switching, that would be about 4 gigawatts of electrolyzer capacity.
Mm-hmm. So big amounts indeed, but two very young companies. I think you both were founded approximately the same time a year ago. Fertiberia is a company which is existing for quite some time already, and also using hydrogen for quite some time already. Grey hydrogen for the moment, but you also started your first plant where you use where you produce green ammonia. So probably the gas prices at this point in time are quite a headache for you, but also the availability for your current production for the grey hydrogen. So I guess more than one reason to move to renewable hydrogen. Could you tell us a little bit more about what your project is and why you choose renewable hydrogen?
Yeah, sure. No, Fertiberia is using this hydrogen to produce ammonia, and with this ammonia we produce fertilizers to grow food for everybody. And this, so we are very experienced in already using hydrogen as such, and effectively the biggest hydrogen consumption in Europe is actually used to make ammonia. So it's a very logical step, and we thank also Milan for his foresight to place this 20 megawatt electrolyzer at our site. But that's not for without any reason, because of course there is already a huge hydrogen consumption on that site. So it's very easy to blend in the green hydrogen in this production and produce the first, and let's say at this moment still the biggest green fertilizer production in Europe. This is not the first, and then we're busy with a number of big projects to not only replace our natural gas consumption, because that's an easy part actually, but also replacing our ammonia imports in Spain. So we have major projects on all our sites to change that, and we're also looking into new sites. So we also announced a big project in the north of Sweden, very close to H2 Green Steel actually, and to build a completely greenfield green fertilizer site. So we think that the green fertilizer is the future. It is supported also by the EU with the acknowledgement that we need to replace a lot of the grey hydrogen in our to green hydrogen processes, and yeah, we take this very seriously. We have recently announced our net zero 2035 ambition, which is by far the biggest ambition in the whole fertilizer industry, and we're really planning to be and we are the front runner in this industry. And yeah, in the beginning you saw this movie of this very nice green hydrogen site, production site from Iberdrola, and it is the first. It's not going to be the last, but it is. If you look at all our plants, it's a relatively small unit, but it provides us tremendous learning in how to do this, how to use this, how to create the correct certification to be able to supply green fertilization. Because a green fertilizer is 100% exactly the same as a grey fertilizer. It's totally not different. The only difference is a certificate that you can provide. So that's something where we can, where we must work on. We have built on the systems, and it gives us a big advantage actually with a lot of other fertilizer producers to be able to do this. The second thing is, of course, that with this announcement, it has gained a lot of traction with food companies that for which the fertilizer input is a significant part of their carbon footprint. You can imagine if you make beer or potato chips or things that use huge amounts of grain, barley, potatoes, things that have serious inputs also in fertilizers to be grown. That fertilizer part is a significant part of their carbon footprint, but is a relatively low part of their cost. So it's by working with these companies, and we can learn a lot about what green fertilization can do for them, and it's a tremendous nice work to do this together with them to make the best solution, and it's not only making a green fertilizer is not only actually a product that is made without carbon emissions, so the production is not only the most important, there's also an important factor in its use, and we're also having a lot of technologies to improve the fertilizer in its use, and so we can very effectively grow the products that are the customers of our customers need actually. Yeah.
I actually wanted to ask, what you are using in order to convince people that hydrogen is not just a hype, but it's a new reality, because you're doing it already. But it seems that there doesn't need to be so much convincing, because you have the food industry already behind you and many others as well. So you've done that convincing already. But maybe one thing I want to pick up is, because you said that you want to establish a new plant in Sweden.
Yes.
And from the discussions we had earlier on is that really investments are now, today, following the best renewable sites, basically. So industry is moving where they can find renewables and not the other way around.
Yeah, no, that's correct. And we're blessed to be in Spain and in Portugal with our sites, because that's also an area which has excellent renewable energy. And we are looking around. We're not only looking at our own sites, but we're also looking around what would be the other sites to have great renewable potential. And the north of Sweden is one of those areas. And also, if you look at let's say the current new legislation, it's an area which is more than 90% of renewable energy. So that has its advantages if you want to have a project over there. So we think it's an excellent move, and yes, it has been maybe 50 years or 40 years ago since the last ammonia plant has been built in Europe, and we're now planning at least 3 new ones. So it's a major change. It's a major change.
Okay, now we heard a little bit why and how. Moving back to the European Commission and going a little bit more into the details of RePowerEU, Joaquim, So you've created a massive demand shock, basically, with what you proposed. There is higher targets you're proposing for end-use sector, 75%. So why are these targets important?
Targets are important to give a signal that we are serious about all this, that we do believe in this vector, in this potential here, that these are not just empty words from the Commission. The Commission wants to be ambitious. We've doubled the target to the 10 million tons for internal production. We brought about the 10 million tons of external production. We're pushing the co-legislators to increase the targets in red, 75% for industry, 5% for transport. So basically, we are just setting a scenario where we set the bar high so as to create emulation towards achieving that goal. I think from what I've heard, and also from the previous speakers, and in particular also from Mr. Galan, and also seeing the evolution of this debate since I became in charge of it in April last year, you sense that there's clearly an evolution. A year and a half ago, everything was about the price of green hydrogen. Now you hear much less about the price of green hydrogen, and you hear much more comments about how the result in the end, the price of the end product doesn't change that much as a result of it being green or grey or fossil fuels or whatever. The unblocking, the bottlenecks seem to be in other places. It's the permitting issue that we hear a lot. It's the existence of abundant renewable energy, basically, that will unlock the situation. We heard that there is production potential of electrolyzers enough. What we need is much more renewable energy than what we have. But we hope to have provided a bit more clarity. We also heard a lot this afternoon about the need for investors to have clarity about the regulatory framework. We've got now the 2 delegated acts in consultation, additionality, the greenhouse gas methodology. We're eager to hear what the opinions of industry and others are about those. We've also got new rules on permitting, so we're also trying to do something about permitting. But let's not fool ourselves. I mean, yes, it's a great thing that we're going to say now that there are go-to areas where permitting should be facilitated, but member states, regions, local authorities have to embrace this with 2 arms and full of determination. This is not going to, we're not going to get there just by having changed the legal proposal. We're going to change that as a result of huge amounts of political and administrative energy that are going to have to be put in making this a reality. We also hope to give this year an important nudge to the increase of the hydrogen economy by coming up with our position on the various IPCEIs. Hopefully 2 this summer, 3 until the end of the year. But I think that will also be an important signal for the market of us being serious about the whole thing. There's also, it wasn't spoken today, the reorientation of the Rrf Fund. So the possibility that has been given to member states and the change of the legal proposals also to allow member states to divert some of the existing Rrf money to the Rrf is the fund that was established after COVID to address the economic imbalance created in Europe, to allow member states to put money on hydrogen projects.
I see Marc and I see Ola nodding, so targets and all what you proposed is important. I take from your nodding. Maybe moving to the Parliament, to Mr. Grudler, you received all these or many of these proposals on your table now. You're in the middle of negotiations on the Renewables Directive in particular. So how much of, how likely is that we see at the end of the negotiations the targets which have been proposed now and the other elements which have been proposed? What will be the hardest battle from your perspective?
Very much. The first thing I want to say is that renewable hydrogen is essential to decarbonize hard-to-abate sectors. But indeed, we still have a long way to go, and the revision of the Renewable Energy Directive is in itself a hard battle. It copes with many challenges that the EU needs to face today, to fight against climate change, for example, but also the increase of the energy prices, and also the Russian attack, invasion of Ukraine. We live, can say, an historical moment that we need to take as an opportunity to boost our strategy towards carbon neutrality by 2050. Of course, we need a sustainable, secure, and fair energy transition, and all types of non-fossil-based energy need to be on board. But I just want maybe to focus my speech here on renewables, because that is the first battle we had to face in the revision of RED. It's normal, we are talking about RED. It talks about renewable energy, but it's not so normal, and we have to battle into the parliament because some want to make it a low carbon directive, we can say. Of course, there is place for low carbon hydrogen. I fully believe in it, but in the gas package, not in the Renewable Energy Directive. This is two parts. We need both, but let's be very, I can say, sure of what we want to do.
I think you have all of our support.
Yeah, I focus on it as I am a shadow rapporteur on the RED directive, on the RED revision, sorry, for my Renew group. Then, when it comes to hydrogen and to Rrf and bios, I believe that it is extremely complex to work on the deployment of a renewable hydrogen market, while we still do not know what renewable hydrogen or Rrf and bios legally means. For instance, the Green Hydrogen Alliance, launched in July 2020, will hopefully release a list of projects soon, but are we sure that they will all comply with the criteria set in the Delegated Act that was finally released 10 days ago? And the project in the IPCEI are waiting till 2 years. It's very important to accelerate the transition. It's very important to say we want to accelerate, etc. But realize that it begins, the alliance of hydrogen, it's also in July 2020, the same day as Commissioner Simpson showed the hydrogen strategy. And we have to wait 2 years for the industry to have the final notification of the Commission. It's absolutely incredible. It's not you, it's not DG Grow, it is DG Cont. I know it very well, but maybe it's the same house. But I'm sure that in June we will have the final answer, but it will be 2 years. So now with Repower EU, as I believe in it, I'm sure we have to have a clear acceleration without too much administrative problems. To finish, maybe to some words about the necessity. We need to deploy appropriate regulatory on market tools to have an operational renewable hydrogen market now. This is also a big battle for us. And if you allow me, I would like to say maybe one last word on what we read from the Repower EU plan that has a direct impact on my work on RED, because part of Repower will be included in the text. There's a lot of very, very good things in this proposal. The Commission proposed to nearly triple the capacity for renewable hydrogen by setting a new target of 14 million tons of additional renewable hydrogen, on which 10 million tons will be imported. Importing renewable hydrogen seems to be a better solution than domestic renewable hydrogen. I strongly disagree with this approach. We must not replace one dependency from fossil, coming from Russia or other countries, with another one. And we must maintain the EU strategic autonomy as our main priority. It means that we need to produce hydrogen in Europe first, and if we don't have enough production, then we can have a look outside in order to import. But it's absolutely impossible for me to have a goal on it.
Maybe on that last point, if I could quickly check on the industry, whether you agree on this question on import, if someone wants to react to that.
Maybe I can react to it. I think if you look at import, the most logical thing that will start first is going to be the import of green ammonia. And if you look at, let's say, global projects that are starting for export, they are all transforming the green hydrogen into green ammonia because that's a transportable medium of hydrogen. And I think there is, if you look at areas in Europe that have a massive fertilizer production, those are the areas where natural gas was abundant in the past. So it's Netherlands, Belgium, Germany. Those areas are now also the areas that look massively towards the import of green hydrogen. And I think, it's my personal vision, that this will start with green ammonia, and especially also in those fertilizer sectors that are already capable of importing significant amounts of ammonia this time. So that's a very logical change. And there is not, if you look at additionality, those areas like Belgium, Netherlands, Germany, they have difficulty in reaching the additionality principles because they have a very large amount of gas-fired power plants. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to build their very big giga-scale hydrogen factories.
Joaquim first, and then Ola, you want to come in.
I think we need to supply the nascent demand, and we can't be too choosy. But generally, I think as a political line, I agree that it is very important that Europe has an important foothold in this industry, and that we do not replace our dependency on Russian fossil fuels with hydrogen coming from unreliable partners. And I think that therefore we have to be very careful that we have an important foothold in the industry in the EU, and that when we consider external partnerships, that we consider a diversified, like a good financial investor. You don't put all your stakes in the same business. You identify your partners, you try to diversify them so as to diversify your risks.
And Ola, you wanted to make
a short comment. I think, of course, it's great if we can produce as much as we can domestically within Europe, and I think then the targets here on renewable, higher targets on renewable energy efficiency will, of course, and rules on permitting will help that process forward. And I think another aspect to think about is also what do you use the green hydrogen for? And there have been proposals to use it for low-grade energy, for example, which is, I think, a complete waste. So it really, whatever importing or using here, we should really use it in hard-to-abate sectors, not to anything else.
Yeah. Again, Joaquim.
I just want to react to the fact that the Alliance has yielded 750 projects, and those 750 projects published last November, they all meet the EU taxonomy criteria of a minimum of 70% greenhouse gas emissions. So that has been done.
So that's clarified.
That one's clarified, yeah. And I do think that, to go back to this permitting issue, external, internal, it would be a shame that Europe would not develop a hydrogen industry because of bureaucratic processes that other parts of the world wouldn't have. So the whole world would have much more agile, easy processes of giving ourselves hydrogen than ourselves. I don't think that would be a comfortable position for Europe to be in. I think that we need to look into our processes to make them manageable.
Targets. I would like to move on to prices, but before I would still be very curious, Mr. Grudler, what you are expecting as an outcome from trilogue negotiations, also with the member states who might have some differing views. So what are you expecting?
Well, we are very early on the process, because on RED we'll finish in October only, in the ITRE committee with the main committee in charge of. Then we have to find inside our committee, but to find, we can also find have a spirit of compromise in order to find the best way for all. Because at the end of the day, the most important is that there is a majority on the parliament before the trialogue.
So what is your wish? Because obviously,
my wish, of course, is the most important place for renewable hydrogen. I fully believe in it. It's not because I'm here that I say it. I'm sure that at the end of the trialogue we can say electricity first, hydrogen for sectors hard to abate, maybe ammonia, especially for maritime sector. I think it can be a very good way for ships, and with specific goals, of course, sectorial target at the right level, of course. It's not, as I explained before, we have, for the industry, for example, the first goal at 50%. Now with Repower EU, it's 78% maybe. It's good, but as I explained before, that I think there is a place for both, for renewable hydrogen and also for low carbon hydrogen coming from electrolysis, especially maybe from nuclear power. I don't want to have 100% of renewable hydrogen in RED, because it means that there is no place for other countries who want to make something a little bit maybe different. That's the reason why I think 78, 50 or 78 will be a good way for the industry. Today in Europe we use 11 million tons of hydrogen. It's only grey hydrogen, and the most important is to now have clean hydrogen instead of it.
Moving on to prices. From discussions so far, it hasn't emerged as the biggest showstopper prices, I understand. But then still, nevertheless, I would like to dig a little bit more into it. Because in the end, industry, you're all working in industries which have to be globally competitive. So price obviously plays a major role. And the European Commission has just also in the Repower package put forward CCFDs. So carbon contracts for difference. So is this enough to bridge the cost gap? Is there a cost gap still? Because we see very high gas prices. And if not, what is it that is needed? Can I maybe start with Berg Christian?
Sure. Yeah, no, I think yes, as you say, with the current gas prices, the cost gap is at least smaller. And of course, it depends on different sectors and applications. But I think we need to see this also in a combination, right? Because carbon contract for difference is good for the off-takers. While the producers, to some extent, need to de-risk their investment. And hydrogen is still a fairly immature sector, and where you do expect the production cost to fall going forward. So you need to have some incentives also making sure that you can go early. And then, of course, you do have also on the elements on the application side, having the fuel switch solutions to make sure that you can introduce the hydrogen into the industrial processes beyond the feedstock. And really making those incentives there as well to drive that change. Because industry, that's long-lived assets. What you then invest in today, they're still there in 2050. So we need to make sure that when we invest in the industry today, that we do that in the best possible way.
Mm-hmm. Any views from Marc and Ola on that? Yeah.
I think there is, of course, we have an increased cost compared to if you compare to steel prices. There's a premium we need to pay as a producer, but luckily, so far, it seems like we can actually get this green premium from our customers. We pre-sold about half of the initial production volume, 1.5 million tons already for 5-7 years, getting a premium of about 25% of the steel price. So in that sense, we get coverage for our increased costs, and in that way, we sort of see the value and costs of the green steel being a different commodity as we see as brown steel, even though it has can be used in the same way. And also in a way see the cost and value of green premium, and also the green iron, and also cost and value of green hydrogen. So in a way it helps us to also evaluate the green hydrogen. And so customers from the automotive industry, white goods, construction, having set science-based targets in a way, so they're front runners. So I think, but of course going forward, to secure others, for us, but also for others to follow, of course, public funding in different ways would be a way of securing also the investments in a better way. So carbon contracts for difference could be one way. I mean, we have not discussed another important part of 5455, the emission trading scheme, and also the CBAM. So in hydrogen, the ones producing hydrogen with fossils get free allowances still. I mean, one way, making a level playing field, of course, phase out the free allowances. For steel, it's the same thing. We would almost be able to compete with brown steel if the free allocation was phased out with current prices. So I mean, that's also a way going forward. Another tool for both hydrogen and the products you can make with green hydrogen.
So already there is a market for a little bit, so a premium for
yeah,
green steel, but still some way to go? We have in a way created a market and a definition for green steel, and a price for it. And we heard from Marc earlier that also there's a market for green fertilizers already, the food industry looking at it. How about green aluminium?
Yeah, I can take the example from the recycled part of the aluminium business, and then Hydro established the separate product line, Circular, that is then based on 75% post-consumer scrap, and have then been basically sold out on that product in the near term. So the demand is there, the willingness is there to buy those products. Marc, an additional point?
Yeah, I have a point. Yeah, of course, now you can get the premiums you want, because it's kind of a specialty, right? This is the first green fertilizer, still has to come. But if the industry is going to transition towards 75% of their hydrogen consumption is going to be green, then it's not a specialty anymore. And if you would need a premium, it would increase the cost of farming and will increase the cost of food significantly. So there is definitely support needed if we want to prevent that. We have already enough inflation at this moment, and we don't want to grow that too much. So I think that this support, especially for food, which is a primary consumption item, is important to do that. And we're not going to be helped then only with CCFDs. We need, and I would make a kind of a plea. If you look at renewable energy, electrolyzers, and making green products, you're making products based on air, wind, and sun, and water. And basically that's relatively cheap inputs. So the only thing that's in the way is capital. Yeah, you have to pay for the solar fields, you have to pay for the wind farms, you have to pay for the electrolyzers, and that's all capital. There's hardly any variable cost. So the cost of capital is the most important thing. And that's where EU can help to reduce cost. And not only the cost of capital, but also if you look at electrolyzers, and that's maybe also what's hampering a little bit of development, is that electrolyzers at this moment are relatively expensive, and you can read hundreds of reports that will say, well, in 5 years electrolyzers will cost this. So who's going to invest now in electrolyzers? If I go to a bank, I want to invest now in 1 gigawatt of electrolyzers, they say, well, wait 5 years, because in 5 years you're going to save 400 million.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of money. So we need something that will help in building this more than 1 gigawatt of electrolyzers that we have planned for the coming 5 years. And yeah, we don't want to be the fools that have paid too much in the beginning.
Indeed, that's what we also heard from Niels in the panel earlier.
Yeah.
But talking about prices, one thing is sure that the raw material is getting cheaper and cheaper. Renewables is the cheapest electricity, is the cheapest energy source by now, solar and wind. The only question, and that's what I also take from the first panel, and that was made very, very clear by Mr. Galan, is we need to build like hell, basically. So going back to you, Mr. Grudler, because the European Parliament is discussing higher renewables target. The European Commission proposed 45% renewables by 2030. There seems to be already some more and more agreement in the Parliament as well, 45% renewables. So when we, so first of all, it would be interesting for me to know whether you think the member states are following, but maybe that's a discussion we need to have a little later. But will these targets deliver alone? Does it need something else? What are your discussions in the European Parliament?
First, I just want to say that I fully support an increase at 45%. It was my position, it was the Renew group position since the beginning. It is ambitious and unrealistic at the same time. That's the reason why I think it's a good way. But now we need to see how we can achieve this goal. It's always a problem. Sometimes we show something very ambitious, and after on the sectorial targets, well, not it's too much, etc. It's very difficult to improve. But I think that we need, of course, the sectorial targets, but also we need other sort of tools to boost the deployment of our capacity. I'm thinking, of course, of money. Maybe it can be through the taxonomy. It can be through IPCEI with state aids, of course, and also Horizon Europe for innovation, for instance. I think it can be a good way. Your first question was about the battles. Let me add a crucial tool that has been a winning battle for us, a strong framework for permitting. Has been among our priorities since the beginning. How should we achieve our hydrogen targets if we do not have the capacity installed? In some countries, you need 7 years to have permitting for one wind turbine, for example. It's not possible, and now we have a nice work. We will have a big success on it in a few months, in a few years, maybe 2 years. Seem to be the good way we can go ahead with the permitting, and I think it's very important to meet our goals to have this permitting.
And thank you very much for that. Now we touched upon the price. We touched upon renewables. One other elephant in the room, and that's also the first panel which touched upon it already, is this the delegated act you proposed, which was heavily debated, much more than anything else, I would say, in the last couple of weeks. Now we have it. Everyone was able to look at it. I would like to get a take from the industry representatives. What is it good? Is it bad? The definition we have now on the table. You were also referring to we need this definition. So, what's your take, Ola?
Assuming then it's for the industry as well, since we heard it's for the transport sector. I think it's a big improvement from what we've seen in leaked versions, earlier versions, and it's good to see that regions which have already deployed large shares of renewables are not punished in a way, so that this is recognized. Moving forward, I think I think we in our future projects, for example, in the Iberian project, there will be a lot of additional renewable production capacity added, of course. So the additionality aspect is really important, but putting rules too stringent, I think could especially when it comes to time, could really limit the acceleration of this. Since we talked about capital expenses here, if you need to build a much larger electrolyzer, for example, because you run on solar, and you can only run daytime, which, I mean, it becomes an impossible project. When you have such large investment, they need to run 24/7 with some flexibility, which you will have, of course, but it's an important aspect. There needs to be some flexibility for this.
Flexibility is important.
Yeah, and it will be good because it will accelerate, and we will get more renewables. I don't see it's not tampering with this additionality. It's just if you do it too detailed, the perfect will be the enemy of the good.
So good or bad, what we see now?
Big improvement. There could be some further improvements.
Okay, Marc and Per Christian.
No, I agree. I think it's a first step that creates clarity, and it's a step forward, definitely. I think additionality is an important thing because make the calculations, it doesn't make sense to first have a gas-fired electricity plant producing electricity and then use an electrolyzer to produce hydrogen to make ammonia, because then it's creating much more CO2 emissions than as straightforward as a MAR process. So it makes a lot of sense. I think it has the risk of becoming a kind of a dogmatic approach. So it's very strict sometimes. Yeah, well, you have to be strict, but I think there is with small modifications, a little bit to the side, left and right, and with a little bit more lenience, I think we can improve a lot the speed at which the programs.
You want to add something to it?
Yeah, no, I can mention that at least on the additionality, when you have to some extent a grace period until 27 gives you some slack. However, there's a risk then that you put too much honor on the developer, and especially for new companies coming in as a hydrogen producer, then you're also then fully responsible for that full value chain. And of course, we'll need to work closely in the industrial collaboration and with partners in projects. But it is a challenge to be able to make that work. The production during while power is available might also be a challenge in some areas, right? So that you don't really get the return on investment of your assets.
Maybe before we're wrapping up, and I know that you have a full stop at 4, Mr. Grudler. One last question, which is really intriguing me, because I mean we have all these elements on the table now. We have the hydrogen accelerator, everything which has been put in Repower, and all the work also the Commission has been doing in the past, and with the support of the Parliament now. Will we be fast enough? Because we're not the only region in the world who is looking into hydrogen. I just looked at the last 5-year plan of China, where one of the 6 technologies they want to push the future technologies, how they call it, is hydrogen. So that is just one example, but other regions in the world are also looking into it. So all what we have now on the table, will we be fast enough? And maybe just a very quick answer before I have a last question to you to wrap up. Maybe to start with you, and I just go down the line.
Thank you very much. I think it's fast enough. Exception for IPCI, I explained before that it was a little bit long, with an exception also for RFNBO's Delegated Act, which arrives a few months before we finished RED 3, because it is a Delegated Act about RED 2. Was finished in 2018, and then, but those exceptions, I just want to say that there is so much innovation in Europe with all industry, with all companies, and this European plan is well made, because first we put money on innovation in industry especially. Then the European companies are ready to fight in a global market. Okay, we can have produce coming from Asia, from different parts of the world. We are ready. We have innovation. We have our own production. And after, we can have infrastructure, of course, especially in transport. It's a good way. At the beginning, in 2020, I have some companies coming from Asia explaining me, it's very bad, the European plan is bad. First, infrastructure. But if we did it, we will not be ready for our industry to fight with them. The mistake was made with a solar panel, because we directly give money from the European to the pocket of the Asian industry, because nobody was ready.
Now.
But now we need time, and now it's good. Let's continue like that. That's the reason why I think it's fast enough. But now we have to continue, of course, to be ready for the future.
Will be fast enough?
Well, I think the targets are there, and ambition, and there's also allocated a lot of funding. So I think now it's how to make sure that capital becomes working capital, that we get them into the projects soon enough, that the support scheme that we define is simple enough to really deploy them quickly.
Joaquim, you have to be confident of your own plans.
Of course, I think we have to multiply the communication of positive examples. That's one of the things I think is very important as a multiplying effect, that we communicate a lot about positive stories. I know that often these stories, if you look at percentage terms, are probably still peanuts in the global scheme of things, but they are very important to make people see that, you know, for instance, there's an aluminium, a steel, and a fertilizers industry that believe, and not just believe, but they're doing something about it. I think we need that, but I think we also need very, dedicated monitoring at high political level, that this is going in the right direction, so that, all the strings are pulled, so that this becomes true. But I'm confident, yes.
Marc, voilà.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult question if we are fast enough with this, because it's a major challenge. If we want to, let's say, change 50% or 75% of our current hydrogen production into green hydrogen, that's going to take a lot of renewable energy, and I'm not sure with let's say 7 years permitting procedures, but also don't imagine if you want to build a new ammonia plant somewhere, it will also take a number of years. And it's not a simple thing you do every day. So we're working on it. We're working on it very hard. We are not the biggest company in the world, but we try, and we move forward and do with the projects what we can do. But we know that we are a front runner in this, and we will most likely beat the target that the EU has set, but I'm not sure if that is valid for all the that are in the same business as ours.
And Ola, if you could also already combine your answer to this question with the answer to the wrap-up question, which is, what is your 3 main requests to policymakers, to Joaquim, to Mr. Grudler, What do you need going forward? And this is a question to the three panelists representing industry, and then I would like to hear from you what you take away from that discussion.
Okay, are we moving fast enough? Then I think we're moving really fast as a company. But if I talk about the steel sector, then in this case, it's not moving fast enough. I think in that case, if I take, then we need to have a much stronger incentive, you could say, or carrot or stick, whatever you see. In this case, it's the emission trading scheme and the CBAM. We need, I think, the position now that the environmental committee took in the parliament is a good one, and we should. Ideally, that would survive in the plenary vote on the 7th. I think, but we need incentives also. So I think in addition to the ETS, I think the delegated act here will be really important. How do you find renewable or green hydrogen going forward, and having additionality there as a strong prerequisite, but being flexible when it comes to the details, really. And then, of course, as a lot of others been into, we need new renewable energy production in Europe, and otherwise we won't have any renewable hydrogen either. So.
Okay, thanks for your 3 points, Marc.
Yeah, I just said what we need is access to cheap capital, and in a simple way. As I said, we're not the biggest company, so we will not have major departments that are running for subsidies. Actually, we have no department running for subsidies, so it's something that we don't have the time to do that, and we're moving very fast. But we don't have the time to wait for subsidies to come. Anyway, sometimes subsidies do subsidize only the non-efficient part of a project, and that's kind of subsidizing the wrong projects actually. So the projects that are efficient by itself don't get any money. So they're kind of competing with projects that should not be. So access to cheap money and somehow a methodology to cover to help, let's say, the first movers in potentially buying too expensive equipment.
Okay, and back, Christian.
Yes, no, it's I think all about speed and simplicity. So of course, having the foundation for quicker processing and decisions, but then also that we look at the system is probably the best, strongest renewable drive in the world, right? But it's also an intricate system around the delegated act, and then how to then be able to maneuver for many companies in this system to really interpret and also for investors to understand how will this impact these projects.
Mr. Grudler and Joaquim, can I invite you to wrap up and tell us what you take away from this discussion?
Very shortly, I just want to say messages well received, and thank you for this very fruitful discussion. I think we have to continue like that. Thank you once again for your initiative, because all stakeholders together, it's easier to go forward, because we have information that we not have in your office, when waiting in your office, you know some things, but not all. And that's the reason why it's important to have a meeting like that and to find together the best way for the future.
All the best anyway for the negotiations forward and for your work,
Thank you very
Joaquim.
It's one of the observations I can do after being more than a year in this job, is that I sense that we've got a very confident, positive and optimistic European industry. And it's a pleasure to note that. I thought that having a job on industrial policy in DG Grow, I would get complaints all the time and how horrible life is and how impossible everything is and we are at the verge of collapse and etc., etc. I get much more the opposite. I've got much more people coming and telling me, look, this great thing we're doing, this is so positive, how can you support? Of course, you know, you're not all telling us that everything's wonderful and rosy, but the picture one gets is of a strong, resilient, confident and optimistic European industry, which is very much the opposite of what you hear sometimes in the newspapers. Also, I mean, I take your point that you didn't give a standing ovation to the regulatory framework coming out of the Commission right now, but I've been around a few years and I've heard worse receptions.
Almost.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not standing, but at least half standing.
No, thank you very much. And with this positive note, thank you very much to all the panelists for joining us. Thank you for being with us. We will be back here at 4:25. So there's time for coffee now outside somewhere. Enjoy and discuss further.